To curb sprawl and make cities more livable, the advice of urban planners for some time has been to build up, not out. But as this pandemic has hit big cities hard, is it time to reevaluate that pursuit of living in densely populated places? With us for that discussion in Orange, California, Joel Kotkin, Presidential Fellow in Urban Futures at Chapman University in California and Executive Director of the Urban Reform Institute. And here in Toronto, Jennifer Keesmaat, former Chief Planner and mayoral candidate for the City of Toronto, currently the CEO of the Keesmaat Group, and we are delighted to have two familiar faces back on our air tonight, admittedly in unusual circumstances, but it's great to see you both. Joel, you just did a series of articles about this, so I want to put you to work first on this. You argued that the pandemic will significantly affect our largest cities most, the megacities that many of us now live in. Just give us a sense of what you foresee.
Well, I think what we've seen, at least particularly in the United States, but also in Europe, is that the pandemic has hit dense urban areas the most, and also, by the way, hit the poorer, more minority populations even more so. Generally speaking, it seems that areas with very heavy transit dependence, which really in the United States is really New York, have been harder hit. Less dense areas tend to be a little better off on this, just because of the way things are transmitted. By the way, I'm a historian by training, and this has been the pattern for quite a long time. Very dense cities are particularly vulnerable in this area. Now, the question is, how do we build cities and accommodate people in ways that are safer? And I think that's going to be a big challenge.
And for the answer to that, we go over to our other guest. Jennifer, you, of course, when you were Chief Planner of Toronto, were a big fan of the notion of intensification. And I wonder whether or not what we're going through right now makes you pause in your championing of a view where too much density can be dangerous to our health.
Well, it's interesting because health has always shaped cities, and we've thought about design in cities as a result of health for generations. So it's not something new to be pausing and saying, what is the implication for how we live? The key question really, though, is what is causing transmission? What is causing the pandemic? And I think one of our biggest clues comes from the places that have been the most effective in responding to the challenge of the pandemic. And it's kind of amazing to realize that Singapore and Hong Kong and Taiwan, some of the densest places on Earth, in fact, early on were the most successful in responding to the pandemic. So there's a pretty big clue there that our systems and processes around healthcare, public education, access to communicating and acting with a civic obligation in mind. There was a change in behavior that was implemented very quickly in those places, even though they're very, very dense. So it raises the question, is density the challenge, or is a public health response? And also, I think Joel's made a very important point. There is a direct correlation between populations that have seen outbreaks and poverty. So we have a lot of areas in cities that are very wealthy, and we also have areas in cities that are very poor. And this is disproportionately affecting poorer populations. So that too gives us a clue in terms of how we need to design our cities. But the finger isn't pointed at density. The finger is actually pointed at processes, systems, and design. And very clearly, Hong Kong and Singapore have demonstrated that if we get the design of our cities right and our public healthcare processes right, density, in fact, can be an asset in responding to a pandemic.
Joel, does she have a point?
Somewhat, but having worked for the government of Singapore, spent a lot of time there. That's a very different kind of city. One of the things is that, to put it frankly, people in Singapore will listen to what the government says because they better. It's also largely a very new city, so a lot of the housing is fairly recent. They also, interestingly enough, the average apartment in Singapore is actually quite a bit larger than the average apartment in many parts of Asia. Lee Kuan Yew basically wanted to have family-friendly housing. So I think, and Lee Kuan Yew was also quite a clean freak. Um, Chinese cities have had a terrible history of high density, pandemics, all sorts of problems. A lot of it because of lack of attention to sanitation. If you spend time in Chinese cities, it's pretty clear that that's what it's like. Singapore went the exact opposite way. Now, just to be clear about it, both Singapore and South Korea are now suffering some sort of relapse, and they're, we won't know the final score there. But here's really the problem: our cities, European cities, American cities, Canadian cities, Australian cities, are very different. People are different. They don't necessarily respond to orders when given. Um, there's a little bit less discipline, if you will. I mean, you go to a city like Singapore, it's just phenomenally disciplined. So I think, yes, we could probably have very high density communities if we're willing to have the kind of restrictions that those cities have had. And that's going to be a big question. I mean, what makes New York so great, and you could probably tell I'm a native, makes New York so great is kind of the chaos. And the fact that New Yorkers generally don't like to follow instructions. And that includes me too, I suppose. But
And that's a problem during a pandemic.
it's a problem during a pandemic. It's very difficult to control populations. But we do know some very interesting things. And again, I don't think we know the whole story. But one of the big issues, and Rich Florida and I've been talking about this a lot, is that there are certain communities that have had very high transmission. Obviously, people from China. But what's interesting is the Chinese community that in Flushing, for instance, has been really hard hit, dense. People live, a lot of people to a place. They have high transit ridership. The Chinese community in Irvine has had a relatively low infection rate. And when I asked Irvine company people why did they think that was happening, they thought that most Chinese in Orange County live in homes and drive places. I mean, there's never going to be one solution to any
Okay,
problem.
hold off on that notion of driving, because we're going to talk about different modes of transportation in a moment. But I want to put your initial point to Jennifer Keesmaat. I guess the fact is that the Chinese in Wuhan province were able to corral this, if we are to believe what they have said, as quickly as they did. Because you can impose martial law and just tell people to go home and put troops in the streets and enforce it that way. We're not about to do that here. Is that part of our weakness in fighting this pandemic?
Well, if we go back to the original question, which I don't think we've resolved yet, which is the question of, is density the problem, or so is lower density communities the solution? You'll notice the conversation quickly started talking about ways communities responded instead of how dense they are. And that's precisely because you can't actually draw a correlation between density and a pandemic, but you can draw a relationship between response and spread. And I think it's really important to make that clear, because it's very easy to say dense places are no good, they're somehow a health problem, when in reality the evidence isn't bearing that out. I have a little bit of street cred in Singapore as well, because I'm on the international panel of experts for the Singapore Redevelopment Authority. And everything that Joel just walked through is absolutely true. But he didn't mention density as being the problem. Having a different culture around social control, that's very interesting, but that's not linked in any way to being also a dense place. It probably is the reason why China and Wuhan were able to react very quickly. But we have really dense cities that we have been able to act pretty quickly in as well. And one of the best case studies from my perspective to look at is what's happening in New York and what's happening in California. In particular, if you look at San Francisco, which is a dense city, it's for an American city, it's quite a dense city. And there's been a very different response by the leadership and by public health, which has led to a very different health outcome. So the density in the built form isn't the hook that you can hang the spread of the pandemic on, but the response of leadership and maybe the willingness, I don't know if you want to get into the politics of people, but the willingness of people to listen to that leadership. But at a very basic level, California and New York had a completely different political response, and they've seen a completely different level of spread. Now, the implication for density, from my perspective, we're learning this in Toronto right now. Density has never been a good promise if we do it poorly. We do not have enough large parks. We know that. You know, Steve, I've been railing about this for years. Midtown in Focus was all about you can't add a ton of growth without adding more park space. If we make the promise that you will have parks to be your living room in exchange for living in a smaller space, then you can't just shut down those parks because you don't have enough of them for people in a pandemic. And that's the link that I think should transform our density. And Singapore actually does have a significant amount of public space and high quality public space. We don't here in Toronto. So we better move quickly to link together a high quality public realm with wide sidewalks, with great parks, so that in a situation like this, we're not shutting down those spaces, making the problem even worse for people because we don't have enough.
I have heard you say that at the intersection of Yonge and Eglinton in Midtown Toronto, there's more development going on here than in all of the city of Boston, and they're not building that many new parks in this area. Let me bring another voice into this conversation, and that is the voice of Doug Saunders, who is a very good columnist for the Globe and Mail, writes about foreign affairs, and he had this to say about our subject today. We have an atavistic, deep-set fear of big cities as pits of disease. For thousands of years, that is what they were, until their very scale and the things they contain flipped the formula upside down. Only they have the infrastructure, staff, and organization to really quash an outbreak. Taipei and Tokyo, both more dense than New York, were able to flatten their virus spread curves almost instantly, using the unavoidable communications, visible deterrents, and bureaucracies that only a tight, packed urban center can muster. Joel, you not only seem at odds with Jennifer Keesmaat, but with Doug Saunders as well. Why do you think he's wrong?
First of all, I think you have to realize we're really talking about cases that are already still facing some significant challenges. There's been a second outbreak in Singapore. We don't know where that's going to go. Some of the numbers in Seoul are not as good as we had thought at first. I think what we're missing is a very important point, is that when we push density, it's generally not with the massive support of the population. With the spreading of the population in almost every country is now actually continuing to grow. If you take a look at what's happened here in California, all the growth is in the exurbs and suburbs. So there's also the fact of where people want to live. And certainly most suburbs, particularly the more developed ones, they have all the medical capacity. It's not like you leave the borders of Toronto and all of a sudden you're in the wilds. So I think that one of the problems is, can we adapt our dense urbanism to follow the Asian standards, which I think would be very difficult. It could be very expensive. You'd have extremely low birth rates, which is one of the reasons why Singapore has been asking over the years for demographic information. This density is liked by some people, not by most, not really an affordable option for most people. If you look at what's happening in the United States, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, all lost population last 2 years. The growth is now actually going from Sunbelt cities and suburbs now to smaller cities. That's the most recent data. So there's also this sort of where people want to live, as well as how we want to pack them in and regulate them. Now, Singapore and Hong Kong have two things very much in common, and that's fairly true of South Korea as well. There's no place to go. You have small countries with relatively little buildable land, and they've had to come up with solutions. I think it'll be interesting to see whether or not Americans will want to live the way people in Singapore do. And I'm not so sure. I think there'll be a group that will want to, but I think most people don't want to live that way.
Well, let me put this to Jennifer. I mean, the fact is, Jennifer, we've been hearing a lot of anecdotal evidence lately that people who have cottages would love to get out of the city and go to those cottages, and it has taken the intervention of the Premier of Ontario to say, please don't do that. The healthcare facilities in cottage country and the supermarkets and grocery stores can't handle an influx of 100,000 people right now. Does that suggest this notion of cities as Doug put it, as deep-set fear of big cities as pits of disease is still very much alive?
Well, I think you have to separate out where people vacation and where they live. And also, I don't know what percentage of the Canadian population owns a cottage, but it's not the majority, and it's definitely not the majority of Torontonians. What we do know, counter to what Joel was just walking through, is that when we do get density right, and remember, it's not always right. Sometimes we do a crappy job. And people don't want to live in crappy places, whether they're suburban or urban. But when we get our density right, when we create beautiful places where you don't have to have a long commute, you can walk to work, when you have ample green space for children to play, where you can have a really strong affiliation with your community and your neighbors, when we get that right, those become the most desirable places. And we only need to look at our real estate market to see this, because even in this downturn, we've seen that there hasn't been a real shaking up of the market. There hasn't been a run on ditching urban places. That might still happen, who knows? But when we get our urbanism right, and this is why, for me, you can't just kind of talk about density in blanket terms. There's lots of terrible density, and
Well, can I
that
put some numbers
terrible
up here?
density needs to be fixed.
Let's
Sure.
do this. Let's put some numbers up here because we should ask the question, how much density is too much and how much is acceptable and so on. For example, Hong Kong has a density of 26,000 inhabitants per square kilometer. 26,000. New York City, conversely, less than half that, 11,000. And Toronto, which on some days feels like a pretty dense place, is only 4,500 inhabitants per square kilometer. And Houston, Joel, a place that you know something about, you praised it last time you were on our program some years ago, it's only at 1,400 inhabitants per square kilometer. So those are four cities that we tend to think of as being very dense places, and yet you can see from the numbers, there's a huge disparity in what the density actually is. So my question, Joel, is what's a desirable level of density?
Well, I think that's, for people, to determine. I mean, one of the problems is the kind of density that we're talking about, the really effective one, is also extraordinarily expensive, and therefore people can't afford it. So, great, you're building wonderful places for the children of the wealthy. As one person put it, London and New York exist, the places where the 1% can marry each other. I don't know if that's any great triumph. I think we need to look at this historically. During the early part of the 20th century, we had a terrible series of pandemics, including the Spanish flu. After that, what we did with our cities, which was very interesting, is we actually made them less dense. New York was much denser, had many more people on the island of Manhattan in 1910 than it has now. Paris, London, almost all those cities did, in some sense, de-densify. Now, they also had more parks. They also made some sanitation improvements. I'm a big advocate of what they used to call in this country sewer socialism, which is just taking care of the basic infrastructure. But we haven't really figured out how to build the kind of density that families want to go to and can afford in almost any of our cities. I mean, if you look at almost every major city, let's say in North America and Europe, the urban population tends to be either very poor, very rich, and predominantly childless. Singapore has a horrendous demographic issue in front of it because people are just simply not having children. And they're very worried. And because they're a country as opposed to just a city, they can't say, well, they can all move out to the suburbs. So I think there are lots of different factors, but it will be very interesting to see whether we can impose the kind of social controls in North American cities and European cities that you now have in Asia. But the other side of it is, if you have a predominantly dense urban culture, you'll tend to have an extremely low birth rate. And if you want to live with that, that's fine too. But you understand that that's what the consequence is.
Let me get Jennifer to weigh in on this notion of good density versus bad density, apropos of the numbers we just shared.
Well, a couple of things about the numbers that you just shared. They're a little bit misleading because they show the city as a whole. So the city of Toronto uniquely, in 3% of the land area is the downtown core. The square kilometer density of the downtown core is 17,000. It's actually very high. It's higher than London, it's higher than Barcelona, but that's in only 3% of the land area of the city. The rest of the city is very, very suburban. So when you roll those two numbers together, you get a little bit of a strange picture that actually doesn't reflect the density that exists almost anywhere in the whole city. So you do have to kind of become quite granular to understand what's going on. When you look at, and I suspect that's the case for what the numbers that you showed on Manhattan as well, that Manhattan has densities that are much, much higher than that, but it's a number that actually takes the much lower density areas and rolls them together. But a place like Singapore, of course, doesn't have those lower density areas. This question of children and where you raise children and whether a dense environment is a good place to do so is a really important one, as Joel raises. And one of the things that we discovered in the context of planning for all of the growth that we're seeing in the downtown is that in interviewing condo livers and young people, they actually told us that they want to raise their family in a walkable neighborhood where it's possible to walk to school, where it's possible to walk to work. And ironically, that was for a pretty funny reason, that most of these young millennials had grown up in the suburbs. They grew up with their mom and dad leaving before dark and getting home after dark. Sorry, before the sun rose and getting home after dark. And they didn't want the long commute as part of their lifestyle, that they were prepared to trade off lots of space, personal space, in exchange for having a shorter commute. But then that raised a problem for us. Do we have enough public space? Do we have enough amenities for children? Because you can't recommend or encourage people to live in an environment that fundamentally doesn't meet their needs once they get there. You need great schools, you need great parks, but the best urban places have these things. And the urban places that don't work, that are very dense, but don't have the amenities we need, are not great places, and they're terrible places in a pandemic. So we need balconies, we need large parks, we need wide sidewalks, we need streets that are closed to traffic, that prioritize the urban movement of people. And this is one of the other phenomenal learnings of this pandemic. There's a ton of space in cities. There's a ton of space in Toronto right now, and it's sitting empty. It's called a road. It's called parking lots. There's a ton of it. 25% of the land area in Toronto is roads. Well, you take out the long commute, which is an opportunity that density introduces. You can live closer to where you work. When you take out that long commute and you no longer need a car and you no longer need to drive, there's tons of space in cities. So we have this incredible opportunity right now to go, hold on a minute, let's get our density right. Let's deliver the large park space we need. Let's widen the sidewalks. Let's close off streets to cars. Let's have more people who can doing a bit more work from home so that there's less traveling taking place in the city. These are all opportunities that are revealing themselves precisely as a result of the pandemic.
Okay, we're down to about 3 minutes here, and I want to introduce one last item for us to weigh in on. And Joel, you brought it up a little bit earlier. Does this pandemic make us reconsider whether or not we should be spending billions of dollars on mass transit, which of course packs people in very tightly together, and at the moment is, a recipe for disaster? Joel, what's your view?
Well, I think that obviously they're going to have to figure out some other way of doing transit. The New York transit system has been a disaster in this situation. I do think that when you look at what's happening, this is a point that just has to be made. Very few children over the age of 5 live in dense cities. That we have all the data on. Interestingly enough, my wife's cousin who lives in Toronto lived in a condo in the downtown, had her first child and moved to a more suburban location. I think that cities can also provide some good opportunities, but work at home is probably the best way of reducing commutes, and that doesn't require a particularly high density. Actually, if we're going to design apartments in the cities and as well as homes, and when I talk to developers, they're going to have to start accommodating workspace in the place of residence, which obviously a studio apartment is probably not a great place to run a business, but people are going to look for different kinds of housing. And I think they're going to go choices. I think when their kids are young or they don't have kids, they may opt for an urban life. And as they get older and they have kids, they move out. And this has been going on for 50 years. And it seems to be, if anything, accelerating.
Jennifer, last 2 minutes to you on whether or not it's still advisable to spend billions on mass transit, which will pack people in, which is the last thing you want in a pandemic.
So there's a couple of things there. And one is what we've learned in this pandemic, which we knew, but now it's so obvious that no one can argue it anymore, is that for many essential workers in our cities, transit is an essential service. It's not an option. So we need to treat it like an essential service and invest in it like an essential service. So that actually comes first. The second part is recognizing that this isn't about giving up on transit. It's actually about going deeper and recognizing even more how critical it is. The second part that you said was about packing people into transit. And I think this is a really critical point. We have had a problem of underinvesting in transit and a lot of moving around in our city because we've assumed that the long commute is a part of everyday life. We've been building regional transit saying, yeah, go live 2 hours away and we'll subsidize putting you on a train every day to get you into work. That is a bad model. And it actually pushes us more towards complete communities where people have the option of walking to work and prioritizing transit service for those who need it most. We also need to think about ensuring that we have a minimum level of service, that we're not crowding people in the way we have been over the past decade. And this is something in a city like Toronto that's gotten to a crisis point. We've had people jammed up like sardines. And I think this public health crisis is showing us we have to think about public space differently. The good news is we have lots of space in cities, but we just can't treat public transit the way we have in the past, which like it's some kind of sloppy seconds, because it's not. It needs to be at the center and it needs to be a priority. The third piece, which is on the operational side, is around cleanliness. There is a disinfectant that's been developed by the Transit Authority in London that sterilizes surfaces for up to 30 days. So you can wash that surface and then it can be used again and again and again for 30 days and it stays completely sterile. I think we should keep our eyes open for really fast-moving, sophisticated innovations that are all about keeping public transit systems clean and more sterile environments. But we have to ensure that we're willing as a public to spend the money necessary to keep those systems much, much cleaner than we have in the past.
Well, if I may say, that was a fast-moving and sophisticated discussion. And I want to thank Joel Kotkin and Jennifer Keesmaat for coming on to TVO tonight and engaging in this conversation with us. Be well, you two. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.